Collins Odwor, sorry for that hiccup, Collins Odwor, to take the platform. Collins, kindly, you can introduce yourself briefly and go straight to giving us your keynote speech this morning. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Calvin. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So my name is Collins Odwor. My last name is Otieno. In Kenya, we have 3 names, and you add a 4th one most of the time because you are given what the family can call you with easily. So in my country, I have a name called Junior. I am a global climate finance and innovations lead for an organization called 𝐵𝐵𝐿. 𝐵𝐵𝐿, probably most of us probably know because we work in almost the countries that you are in. We work in West Africa, East Africa, South Africa, MENA region, and internationally. So I lead the sector on climate finance and innovations. We have, or I have worked in climate finance for the past 7 years. And so it will be a pleasant opportunity for me to share a bit of what I've learned or what I probably have seen in the continent and outside the continent in regards to climate finance. To start us off, I would probably be putting in or talking in 3 areas. And that is the first one, which will be how African countries can ensure that climate finance reaches the most vulnerable communities. I'll give us what we have, what I've seen and what 𝐵𝐵𝐿 probably has been able to do, especially drawing experiences from a project that I closely work under, which is called Voices for Just Climate Action. The second thing that I'm going to talk about is what can be done to improve collaborations between African governments, financial institutions, and international partners in allocating climate finance. And of course, I'll share a bit about innovative approaches from other regions that could help African countries enhance their climate finance initiatives. What I started with is how African countries can ensure climate finance reaches the most vulnerable communities. And I want to start from laying a background. I think this is the 3rd webinar series that you are having in regards to this series that you have been doing. And probably people have laid backgrounds in terms of the climate finance gaps, especially in adaptation, which is a priority to the African continent. And so I would not go into the depths of how many billions of shillings are probably needed in order to mitigate or in order to adapt to climate change in the continent. But one of the areas probably, if one of the speakers might have not talked about the finance gap, which of course would probably form a good background to this particular session, I would probably refer most of us to the adaptation gap report that was produced by UNEP sometime last year. And so just to mention one of the figures is that adaptation gap report mentions that Africa still lacks about $400 billion in order to adapt to the impacts of climate change. And so that means, because adaptation is localized or contextualized to the local person, it means that, sorry for that echo. What that means is that the first question that I asked on how African countries can ensure climate finance reaches the most vulnerable communities, given that adaptation is localized, it simply means that the vulnerability or climate finance in the African continent is not reaching the local communities or people. I know if you say local communities and people, local communities, sometimes you hinder what Other people call minoritized, or people call indigenous people. But I think when we say local communities and people, probably we can be able to encompass all, if you may allow me to use that. So the question that we ask ourselves then is, why is it that climate finance is not reaching the most vulnerable people on the ground? And I'll probably present to us a few pointers on why climate finance is not reaching, so that when we are finalizing that session on number one, then we can come up with ways in which we probably foresee climate finance reaching local and vulnerable communities. And one of such is what we call structural inequalities. If you look at the principles of locally led adaptation, puts as adaptation or climate finance in terms of its governance is more likely that climate finance is governed at a more upper or apex level. So if you look at finance, for instance, especially in the African continent, you realize that it's more of a top-down rather than a bottoms-up administered. So it's not a local person deciding on what to do with or request for climate finance, but it's more of what is seen from above in order to shape what is happening on the ground. The unfortunate thing with that is that most of the time you end up not addressing the issues that local people may wish to address. And probably when we'll be talking, because number 3 of this session, what I call innovative approaches, will probably give us some of the examples of finances that have been modeled in order to counter that challenge of climate finance being led at the top. And so you will realize that communities, especially in the local context, sometimes or most of the time, especially in the African continent, do not have a lot of say when it comes to the governance structure of climate finance in the continent. The second thing, and this is mostly seen especially with the private sector and the banks, especially giving finance to local communities, is that local people do not know how to de-risk. And so for the private sector, for the banks, it is not appetizing to be able to give money to local communities where, of course, private sector most of the time, in fact, all of the time, their aim is to be able to make profit. So if they say in for a penny, in for a pound. So if a private sector invests probably $2 and they're able to get probably $0.5 or a cent of a dollar or $1 on top of $2, then they will proudly invest in that particular venture. But unfortunately, in the local context, the aspect of giving a dollar, another cent of a dollar in terms of profit becomes really difficult. And so the private sector sometimes just feel like, well, it's not worth investing in local people or local communities for climate resilience, because at the end of the day, they are not going to be able to draw that profit that they have been able to put or be able to inculcate within their profit margins. So that's the second tier of challenge that is making climate finance not reach the local ground. The third thing is probably the access modalities of climate finance. And access modalities of climate finance are so cumbersome in the African continent, because if you look at the structures and most of the available finance mechanisms and instruments within the continent, it requires you to be able to fill more than a 30-pager or probably 15 pages of a proposal in order to get resources, probably 200,000 US dollars, in order to act on climate change. But the problem here is, who in the local context do have the requisite capacity in order to fill these particular application forms? For instance, if I talk about such funds as the Global Climate Fund, the Global Environment Facility, the Adaptation Fund, if you look at equity funds, if you look at the private sector funds, it's just too cumbersome in order to even have the credible data to put together in order to get what communities would probably wish to have as climate finance. So that is access modality. So that's the third challenge. The fourth challenge that is most of the time piling up on communities, on local communities, and the reason as to why they're not able to have climate finance most of the time is, of course, the issue of, if you look at it well in order, well balanced, you realize that the target of most finance instruments are misaligned with the priorities of communities. So I would want to give us a very practical case. Communities are now looking for, especially in the Kenyan context, and I want to stick to that. Communities are looking for grants to be able to deal with the impacts of flooding in the country. That is what communities are looking forward to. And purely, and underline what I said, grants. But here is a finance instrument which is called issue resilience, where you ensure for resilience. So as much as you're going to take these finances to be able to reduce or lessen the impact of climate change on your livelihoods, the return is a bit, while the priorities are very much aligned, they misalign when the communities are thinking of the return value. Look here, if I am going to request for a grant and you give me a loan, for instance, it becomes a bit of a challenge for a community to be even able to put together that strength and courage to be able to approach such an application. So that becomes a very critical problem for communities. The other thing, and the next challenge I'm going to talk about, is the issue of governance. So you realize that communities, most of the African communities, are not organized in such a way that they align with what these financial instruments would want. For instance, before you apply for, let's say, a GCF fund, you have to be an organization that is credible. You have to be an organization that has a track record in managing financial. You have the capacity to be able to manage the sum of money provided by GCF. You have to have a safeguarding policy. You have to have a gender policy. You have to have a localization policy. You have to have so many things that local communities do not have. Local communities and local organizations, local community organizations or community-based organizations are simply not able to compete because what is the minimum provision for applying for probably, let's say, a SAP project, Simplify Approval project in the GCF? It is probably 10 million, less than 10 million, or probably because GCF will not give you probably some little money somewhere. They give you what is within their project portfolios. So imagine GCF providing you 10 million US dollars and you have never managed $1 million US. They can't trust you with their money. So these are some of the issues, and I'm not going to exhaust, I'm just going to limit them to those 5, because this is what we see in the African continent. So if you look at these 5 issues that we've talked about, then it becomes very difficult for African communities to be able to access climate finance because of these structural governance and policy issues. But there are opportunities that African countries can ensure that these particular finances reach local communities. And I would present for us a few of these particular cases. And case number 1 is being able to enhance the capacity of local grassroots civil society organizations to be able to consume and align their policies with the targets of these particular funds. So I would suggest advocacy in 2 streams. Advocacy stream 1 is supporting African civil society and community-based organizations to align their structures, governance structures, so that they can be able to consume. That is advocacy, internal advocacy and lobbying. But external advocacy and lobbying will go into ensuring that the resources that are provided by such institutions, such as the private sector, are least targeting profits, but targeting changing of lives. We have seen so many social enterprises arise and change lives. For instance, there's a social enterprise that I've worked closely with that is called Mwangeni Rural Development Program. What they do is they are trying to ensure that communities can be able to use what they have to build their own local resilience. So what this means is that communities are provided what we call seed money, and they are doing what is called honey value chain project, where they keep honey, they keep bees produce honey, they sell to the provider, in this case, the private sector, the honey. After selling this particular honey, they have built their resilience because bees are known for pollination. And so their ecosystems are greener. They are able to control floods. They're able to do so many other things based on afforestation associated with the bees, but are also able to bring in a livelihood because they earn profit from selling honey to the private sector. But the private sector is also able to make a profit because after taking the honey from the farmer, they are able to sell this honey to another market where they can be able to reap their income. So it's not directly piling the pressure on the local community and giving them a loan, but it's developing sort of a social enterprise where you are changing the lives of the community, but also earning your profit, but not from within the community. You are earning your profit from outside the community in a very controlled market. So that's one. The other thing that African countries can be able to do in order to attract resources to local communities, I think, and I'm much convinced, is being able to look at a bottom-up approach that can be able to ensure that local communities are able to access climate finance. And what do I mean by this? It is what we call participatory climate risk assessment. How can governments, especially regional, I know in Kenya we call them county governments, in other places we call them regional governments, in Uganda we call them provincial governments. How can these local governments be able to partner with local communities to conduct what we call participatory climate risk assessment to inform such country documents such as the National Climate Change Action Plan and the national determined contribution? Look here, there is no money, and I want to put this in bold. There is no money that will come to any country to fight climate change that is misaligned with the national priority. Let's just get that out of the way in the beginning. So as much as national priorities are misaligned with the grassroots priorities, unfortunately, there will be no money trickling to help communities adapt to the impact of climate change that they see at that particular level. And so trying to ensure that local contexts are well aligned with national priorities in one way or the other enables climate finance to trickle down. Because at the end of the day, I think in Kenya, I saw a circular that was running around saying that unless you align yourself with government priorities, you are out of the game. And I think that is the truth of the matter. So to be able to help us curate programs, even if it means having a broader perspective of what local communities might be going through, but I think mentioning one or two issues that local communities have in a national context helps local communities be able to enhance that access to climate finance to boost their resilience at that local level. And I think one of such funds, and I will be mentioning examples of such funds that have done this so that we can draw from. One of such funds that have been able to do this is what we call Financing Local-Led Climate Action Fund, that is being given by the World Bank, of course, in partnership with a few governments, Dutch government, we have Swedish government, we have Danish government that is running in Kenya currently. And I think Sierra Leone is also putting a case for their country in that to benefit from such instrument. The idea here is, can we be able to have participatory climate risk assessments at the local level before national policies are put in place, so that it's more of locally led policies at the national level. They reflect, the national policies reflect what people on the ground might be able to want to see. So that is number two. The other way we can be able to ensure that climate finance reaches the most vulnerable communities in African continent is being able to structure funds that are very patient with communities, especially, and this is directly to the banking and private sector, any private sector philanthropy that is developing their funds. There is no problem making profits. Let me say that, but making profits when something has been done makes sense, rather than making profits even before something is done. For instance, Issue Resilience or Africa Risk Capacity Facility. The problem with such funds is that they want to make profit immediately. Let's not get this wrong. There is a very close correlation between climate change and trade. But let us not be quick to go into trade before we make a change. We need to, because for instance, climate resilient agriculture needs to translate to trade, but it cannot be within 2 seasons. We have not even broken even. So you can't trade in anything. You're still trying to enhance resilience within such communities so that they have surplus to give to the market. So you have to be able to have very less aggressive funds and very patient funds in this case that communities can be able to access to be able to build their resilience before they sell the surplus to the market. And a similar fund that I was talking about, the one on honey value chain, they first ensure that the farmer has enough honey within their store before they sell you the surplus or before they give you the surplus. So we have to be very patient with these particular funds. The third, or the fourth issue, especially on how to ensure that local communities are accessing climate finance in the continent, is being able to support local structures, support formation, support capacity, support knowledge brokering, what we call South-South partnerships within these local structures, so that they can be able to do proposals, they can be able to have formal registrations. If we are able to support them through all these processes, then they can be able to, and what I call South-South partnership is more of what African governments and most of us call benchmarking. So if there is some youth organization, for instance, in a place in Zambia or Zimbabwe that have been able to access this amount of money. For instance, in Zambia, I think AACC, the guy, I can't remember his name so well, but I think there's a fund they are running through WWF. If these people have been able to get these resources and they are already utilizing these resources, the question then is, how can a Kenyan youth group be able to benchmark or learn from them to be able to follow that process? But that can only happen when we are doing South-South collaborations. We are building the capacity of these youth groups and then ensuring that resources flow to them through their own initiatives. That's another thing. The other thing, and I think I'll talk in the third question I asked myself this morning, is having some innovative climate finance instruments that are able to work for communities. And I know quickly people, when you talk about innovative climate finance solutions, people are always quick to go to carbon markets. People are very quick to go to blended finance. People are very quick to go to equity funds. People are very quick to go to insurances. But I think let's spare that for the third question. So I want to quickly stop at how African countries can ensure climate finance reaches the most vulnerable communities, and move to the second question on what can be done to improve collaboration between African government, financial institutions, and international partners in allocating climate finance. Almost the same as what I was mentioning above, especially on South-South collaboration or South-North collaboration. So it can either go South-South collaboration or South-North collaboration. What is it that has worked in Zambia that can work in Kenya? For instance, in Zambia, and I'm giving you a very practical case. Initially, if you checked, in Zambia, their CDF, what they call Constituency Development Fund, was working other issues, including climate change. So Constituency Development Fund would be used, including in response to climate change issues. In Kenya, it wasn't. After HIVOS undertook some study in Zambia and looking at local climate finance instruments, what we found out is that in Zambia, they could be able to use their Constituency Development Fund, 2% of it, to go to climate issues, responding to climate change issues. We lobbied our government to ensure that at least we also allocate some percentage of this, because we have a similar Constituency Development Fund, but it was limited to security, education, and security, education, and infrastructure. But now, through the last week, if you follow Kenyan news, you'll realize that the president himself said the CDF is going to be over 600 million Kenya shillings, and a percentage of it will go to issues of climate. So I think that is what I'm calling South-South collaboration. But South-North collaboration is looking at what is it within our contexts that we can collaborate with, especially in the pillar of capacity development and technology transfer. What can we collaborate with, in particular in local contexts, with a northern country? What I mean northern is developed countries under the Paris Agreement, which are Annex 1 countries. How can we collaborate with these global north countries in order to support our capacity development and technology transfer? With the private sector, a very tricky and sloppy place. How do we ensure that private sector are able to know our context? And what I was saying, less aggressive funds that can take time. Because look here, we are not going to discuss anything with the private sector, including the Africa Development Bank, if they're not getting profit out of it. They are profit-making entities. That's why they're called the private profit sector. They're profit-making entities. So how do we already talk to the banks, for instance, on green lending? How do we already talk to the banks on trying to provide green sustainable finance? Because in my previous role, probably if you look through me, you will see I've worked in a few institutions. In my previous roles, one of the things that I was doing was to be able to work with what we call MFIs, microfinance institutions, macro and microfinance institutions, to look at provision of green finance, of course supported by philanthropists, but ensuring that if a microfinance, for instance, what we call saving and lending cooperative, has a people that would want to probably transit justly in the energy space, then they're given some leeway in taking solar water heater, not at market rate. If market rate is at 9%, and we are already ensuring that through this, the circle knows that they're also contributing to reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, we lower that percentage to 5%. But remember, for anything lowered, the banking sector must always get something, or the private sector needs to get something. It's either they're getting a seal of approval from the manufacturing controller in the country, what we call the green seal of approval, or you ensure that you bring in what we call cap and trade. So they can be able to regain some part of that from the green bonds. They are able to gain part of that from carbon markets. So something has to give for the private sector. You just need to find out which one. Uh,
Hello?
let me finalize.
Okay, it's fine.
Thank you. So then I think innovative approaches for other countries, other regions that could help African countries and enhance their climate finance initiatives. There are few, but I think one of the things when I talk about innovative climate finance solutions is always to critique these solutions before we go in them. And I have seen most of the people saying we can be able to go for what was proposed in 2009 through Mellor's, what we call debt for nature swaps. I mean, critique that. People have proposed carbon markets, also critique that. People have proposed what we call triple P, which is public-private partnership, or what we call blended finance. Critique that. I think my time is over, but it's an area that I like talking about. If we find time within the course of this webinars, I can come talk on innovative climate finances, their advantages and disadvantages, so that we can be able to learn. Otherwise, thank you so much for having me, and I hope that I was able to deliver. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Collins, for that rich keynote. Yeah, thanks for unpacking even the climate finance within the African context so that we can actually understand climate finance and bringing it much closer home with those priceless examples within African countries. And there is a lot within climate finance, and I would like to believe that we have also benefited, especially on some of the key points that you were mentioning concerning the climate finance gap. You would imagine 400 billion, and the hassles that are there within the climate finance, where the local people, are they getting the funds? Is the funds coming to the right people, or it's still a top-down approach, and the local people are not even having a say within the climate finances? And also, you talked about the access modalities. Coming up with a 15-pager with someone who is at the front line of climate change, coming up with a 15-pager, and there is need for an audited accounts. Do the local people have all those things? Those are some of the things that are limiting these finances, these investments, so that they can actually reach to the local people, and making it almost impossible for the local people to get these finances. Thank you so much for unpacking it and making us also understand it from a direct and from an African perspective. Thank you so much, also Kelvin, for covering my back. With these issues of Wi-Fi, you never know what's going to happen. But I'm happy that I'm here and also part of the conversation. Now we are moving on to the panel discussions, as Collins has actually unpicked what climate finance is, bringing it close to our homes, making us understand that it's actually these investments, these funds are related for climate mitigation, adaptation, and or resilience. So now we are coming into the panel discussions, and we welcome um, um, brother Isaac, yes, Isaac Abdullah, and also Adamu Salisu. So we welcome them to this initiative. I know you're going to give a brief introduction of yourself. Then I will first leave this floor to brother Isaac. So I would want to pose a question to you, like the status of climate finance in Africa, and also ways to improve these accesses and best practices within the African context. What would you say would be the ways that we can have in Africa so that we can improve access and the best practices within our African context, so that we can like have people, have these local people, have these organizations that are fighting climate change access these finances. Over to you, Brother Isaac. You just give a little bit of your introduction, then you can take on the initiative. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Um, First of all, I'm thanking for Sustainable Africa and the coordinator. And after that, my name is Sheikh Abdullah Mohammed. I think this name is written on Gmail. My name is Sheikh Abdullah Mohammed. I'm from Somalia. Um, I am a youth and climate activist, but for the last several years, I'm doing for that and humanitarian or and voluntarian work of the environment on climate change. After that, in Africa, there is a lot of countries, and there is a big challenge about the climate change. As Shaq, there is a several strategies to develop the climate finance. First of all, is to understand what's climate finance. Really, climate finance reveals the financial resource investment funding mechanism dedicated to addressing climate change. It encompasses both public and private sector, finding aimed at mitigation greenhouse gas emission. That's the mitigation, and helping countries adapt to impact of climate change. That's the adaptation. There is several strategies to develop the climate fund. Um, as me, there is the main one that need to understand the community to know the climate finance is to build their capacity. Whenever to build the people's or the local communities capacity, it is whenever the people understand the climate finance needs and what the climate finance needs. As my country, Somalia, there is a lot of funds that the government allocate to develop the climate finance. It's called Somalia Climate Fund, and it uses just only to make adaptation the people of the climate. So the government builds the people's capacity. They strongest they make strongest the capacity of local government and organizations to access, manage, and utilize the climate finance effectively. And they make trainings of financial management seminars, workshops about that. And that after the government vision is after 5 years, all the people is to understand the and make adaptation of the climate. So it will be easy to all people make fun to develop their climate awareness. And as another one, there is a what's called local decision making, and if the community, when the government takes action, and the role is if the government take or give the role of the local community, it is easy to post the policies that the local community or vulnerable community are a part of that policy because of if the only government prepare the policy about climate finance, it will be difficult to implement because of there is a lot of vulnerable community. There is a lot of needy people. If they don't get their role, that policy will not be finished. What's wrong? And another one, there is a what call it community-based adaptation. It is like it is near of capacity build. It's about community-based adaptation project is that build resilience to climate change at the local levels. These projects should be designed and implemented with active participation in the community. And then I think there is another strategy that's called climate information service. And and also there is another one, nature-based solutions. and to promote nature-based solutions, to make government or the local community or the countries what's called reforestation, sustainable land management, coastal
Hello?
ecosystem restoration. Hello?
Yeah, sorry to interject. Would you kindly round up?
What?
Sorry, would you kindly round up your presentation? Hello?
Hello? Okay,
Yes.
okay, 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 okay. Okay, thank you. There is something internet barriers. Um, the last one is monetary evaluation to make the people and the government what's called a monetary evaluation to the people. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. And my apologies for the pronunciation of your name. But otherwise, thank you so much for giving us those great points, like making people, the local people, being involved in making these local policies so that they can actually own their initiatives, and also having locally led climate initiatives, and also doing evaluation to see whether are we making an impact, or it's one of those engagements that comes and goes. Soon after its implementation, people forget about it. But thank you so much. Then quickly, I will call brother Adam. You can kindly introduce yourself, then also take the floor. Thank you so much.
Um, Good morning, everybody. My name is Adamu Salisu. Although a lot of discussion is on, and a lot of people have done justice to this topic, but the area I want us to look at, all of us, is the area of the local people, the climate change related issue itself. You find out that majority of the places we have this climate related issue are vulnerable people, are people that are very poor, and people that are handicapped financially. So, and again, another thing is these people don't get to hear their voices. Yes, we are looking at African as a case study. If you take African, for instance, our majority of our government, I don't know for other countries, but majority of our government don't focus on these vulnerable people. Normally where we have this climate change related issue pronounced more, the people that live close to this place are people that are very financially handicapped. So you find out that it is very difficult for their voice to even be heard. So majority of the grants that are coming don't even get to these people. They don't get to them. In fact, the people don't even know about this grant. So you find out that it's just like it's a cycle of the same people getting this grant, getting this grant. Now, and more thinking, it is won't it be better for a government to take it as a deliberate action or as a deliberate policy that, oh, okay, let's register a department or a ministry or anything that it could be called to register all the places we have climate related issue, because these people don't even get to know about ground. People don't get to know about anything like that. And even if you try to work for these people, it is the people that write best. Even if this majority of people that get this grant might not even know about climate change, might not even get to these people. Because if you go to our local areas today, I'm talking about Nigerian, for example, you find out that majority of these places have been there for donkey years, and they've been lying there. They've not gotten any help for more than 20 years. So and this grant are ongoing. So you wonder, where is this grant going to? Where is the money going to? Because these local people cannot apply. They can't write these things. So it is better that we identify these people. Identification should be the first priority. If we can identify these people, then we'll put our money into there. But if we are at the cost of want to, from a far distance, want to screen application, then you are making the application difficult for even the people that are very vulnerable. They will not get access to the fund. So you find out that at the end of the day, this fund is not going to where it's meant. So climate change issue is persistent because it's not reaching to where it's up to. So the problem is continuing, and we'll continue to clamor for climate change. We'll continue to campaign, and the campaign is not going to where it needed. So you see, this is a serious gap. It's a serious problem we are experiencing. I don't know if other part of Africa is also facing the problem, but I know majority of us are facing this problem. Thank you. This is what I just want to say.
Thank you so much, Adamu Salisu, for that engagement. This time I will leave it to question and answer segment. So if we have participants who might have that burning question, you can actually indicate, then we can actually give you the floor so that you can raise your questions. And we have a rich panelist that is present here today, and I know that they will do justice to anything that is being raised within this webinar. So Kelvin, kindly assist also me when I don't notice maybe hands being raised. You can quickly come in and interject.
Alamin Musa Ado has raised his hand. Alamin, go ahead and ask your question, and we would like to ask our panelists to respond that question in less than 1 minute, so that because we have only 8 minutes to complete our discussion. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Alamin.
Hello, good morning. My name is Alamin Musa Arko from Nigeria. I have a question. It's related to what Adamu Salisu just previously talked about. It's about why is there a very big gap between this between the climate change advocacy program and the local communities. I live in the local communities here, and most of the communities we have here, just like he said, are very, very financially disabled. They don't have the ability to finance this climate change initiatives. The biggest problem is not even only financing them; it's even knowing about these climate change issues. So my question here is that why is it that most of the climate change advocacy programs don't liaise with the local traditional leaders of every level? Rather, they choose to collaborate with the political leaders, whom, to be fair enough, mostly have these policies only on paper, but they usually don't work towards seeing the feasibility of the working of these policies. But the traditional leaders, whom are closer to the local people, whom are even better suited to make sure that this knowledge is being of the climate change issues are being passed along to the people or to the locals. Even when it comes to the local financing, for them to get the finances to able to work out these issues, why is it that there is no collaboration between the climate change advocacy program and the local traditional leaders or rulers in the community? Thank you.
Adam Salisu, before you go, could Colin Sodur respond to this question before we come to Adam? Kindly.
Can I respond to that? Hello?
Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you. You see that, I used to tell my colleagues very well that if you look at majority of government policies, all these international donors, they might have good intention of want to tackle climate change, but the approach, to me, it is just like it is not holistic, or they are not ready yet. Because first of all, the first problem of tackling the problem is to identify that problem. So I'm saying that it will be very better. We'll start identifying climate change related issue, the areas where we have them more. By the time we identify them, we can recross the identification. You send other people to check. You send other people to check. We'll get so as to get the actual fact on the ground. Then we'll not start picking them according to priorities or according to scale of reference. But if we are saying that everybody will be going to the net to be applying, even at our own local level, people go to the net to apply. Then you are going to continue to have a single people benefiting every time you are applying. Only a peculiar people benefiting it. It will not be getting to the actual people, because the first thing that will be done is identification. You check them based on priority. If you can identify them holistically. So I'm not looking at the issue of climate change is not being treated holistically. It's more or less politically. So if you are looking at it holistically, in fact, it will get to everybody, because you don't even need to start applying. It is first of all the people who come identify. Okay, let's say for instance, the Zait grant that is ongoing now. The Zait grant should the first priority is less identification of areas where we needed to come in, climate related issue. People will go into it, key into it, incentive. People will bring a lot of area of related, they will check, will confirm them through their geographical location, through grid, a lot of things will confirm that if they are okay, in fact, we'll start taking care of the one after the other. So if we are not doing this, it's just like it is more political. Okay, let everybody know that this person is doing this person is doing it, but in reality, we don't meant well. I think this is just to his answer. I don't know if I've answered him correctly. Thank you. Thanks.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much, Adamu. Kelvin, are you still there? Collins, are you there?
Yes, Jonathan, I'm here.
Yes. Did you hear the question that was asked?
If you can repeat it, please. Sorry.
Okay. Al Amin Musa actually asked the question, and he said that if I got it also correct, he said, why do we have this gap where we are having the funds not getting to the local people? For instance, he was mentioning that why is it these funds are not being included in the local
Jonathan, I think your network, but if I got you right, you're asking why funds are not getting to the local people. Calvin, is that so?
Yes. Can you hear me, Collins?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Jonathan and Collins,
Yes,
we have 2 minutes. Could Collins do this in 30 seconds? Because we have 2 minutes. We don't want to left hanging. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll do it in less than a minute. The reasons as to why funds are not getting on the ground is what I had mentioned. Mismatch between national and local priorities. That is one. The second thing is the issues in regards to channeling of the funds, which I said that we can talk to in the next session. For instance, if you have groupings of communities, where do we put the funds? For instance, if we bring in money, where can we put it? That is number one. That is number two. Number three is the capacity gaps. Capacity governance gaps. Those are also issues that are part of the reasons why finances are not getting to the ground. But most importantly is what I mentioned at first, misalignment between national, local, and international priorities, because there is no finances that will get on the ground without them being aligned to the national priorities. So if you put your house in order to ensure that local priorities are the same as national priorities by some extension, you are able to receive those funds. But I think these are barriers that we can be able to talk to and ensure that we achieve them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have come to the end of our session. Thank you, everyone. We will reach you out with an email. Thank you so much. See you next time.